The animals that evolution couldn't balance. There is a deer standing at the edge of a forest in northern Canada. It is not moving. Its ears are angled forward, its muscles locked in perfect stillness, its eyes tracking something in the tree line that has not yet appeared. The wind shifts. The deer doesn't run. It doesn't breathe. It simply waits. For a moment, this looks like perfect adaptation. An animal finely tuned by millions of years of pressure, calibrated to survive. That's not what this is. 1. The illusion of perfection. Most people assume evolution is a process of refinement, that over enough time, life moves steadily towards something better, faster, stronger, more balanced. The natural world, in this version of the story, is a machine that always corrects itself. The evidence suggests otherwise. Evolution doesn't optimize, it improvises. It solves the immediate problem without any awareness of the problems it creates downstream. Every adaptation is a trade. Every advantage comes wrapped in a cost so subtle, it sometimes takes millions of years to become visible. And by then, it is too late. What we call adaptation is often just a debt that hasn't been collected yet. 2. The cost of armor. In the shallow waters off the coast of what is now Eastern Africa, roughly 400 million years ago, a fish made a decision that wasn't a decision. It began growing bone, not in a skeleton. On the outside, a full external plate of calcified tissue, heavy and rigid, wrapping itself around the animal like a fortress. These were the Placoderms, the first armored vertebrates. And for a time, they dominated every ocean, river, and inland sea on the planet. They were, by every visible measure, an extraordinary success. Then something changed. Faster, lighter, boneless fish began appearing in the water around them. Cartilaginous animals, sharks, rays, chimeras, that could bend without breaking, accelerate without the drag of their own weight, turn in fractions of a second. The placoderms couldn't. Their armor, which had protected them from everything that had come before, was now the precise mechanism of their extinction. The armor didn't fail them. The world simply changed the rules. Researchers still debate the exact timeline, but the pattern is unmistakable. An animal so thoroughly specialized in one direction of protection that when the nature of the threat shifted, it had no axis left to adapt along. The defense had consumed the organism entirely. 360 million years ago, every placoderm species on Earth vanished. The armor remained. The animal did not. 3. Too much of a good thing. There is a species alive today in sub-Saharan Africa that produces a hormone almost identical in structure to human adrenaline, but it produces it chronically, continuously, at rest. The African wild dog. Scientists noticed something strange in behavioral studies conducted across Botswana and Zimbabwe in the early 2000s. These animals, highly intelligent, extraordinarily coordinated, capable of hunting success rates that dwarf lions and cheetahs, were dying young, not from predation, not from starvation, from stress-induced organ failure. Their own nervous systems were consuming them. The wild dog evolved in an environment of intense social complexity and near constant territorial pressure. The hormonal response that made them brilliant hunters, hyper-aware collaborators, and eerily synchronized pack animals. That same biological wiring, in environments where the pressure never fully lifts, becomes a slow internal collapse. Evolution gave them a remarkable instrument. It just never built them a way to put it down. The research suggests this is not unique to wild dogs. Across the animal kingdom, scientists have identified what some have begun calling evolutionary overshoot. The point at which an adaptation becomes so dominant within an organism that it begins to work against the organism's own continuation. 4. The animal that grew too much. There's a kind of deer that no longer exists. The Irish elk, Megalochirus giganteus, stood roughly 2 meters at the shoulder and carried antlers that stretched nearly 4 meters across. not metaphorically. Literally, a rack of bone wider than most rooms, weighing up to 40 kilograms, balanced on a cervical spine that, biomechanically, should not have been able to hold them. For hundreds of thousands of years, it did. The antlers were not ornamental, or rather they were, but that was the problem. Sexual selection, the quiet engine that runs parallel to natural selection, had been pressing on the Irish elk for so long and so hard that the antlers had crossed a threshold. They had become genetically locked. The females selected for them so consistently across so many generations that the males who survived long enough to breed were, almost without exception, the ones carrying the largest, most energetically expensive structures their bodies could produce. It is estimated that growing those antlers annually consumed roughly the same caloric energy as sustaining the animal's entire cardiovascular system for a month. Then the forests returned. At the end of the last glacial period, the open grasslands that had supported the Irish elk for millennia began to close. Trees appeared. Dense, tangled canopy. The antlers, those spectacular proof of evolutionary success, became the precise instrument of the animal's death. They caught in branches. They slowed movement. They made the simplest acts of navigation through forest undergrowth geometrically impossible. The last Irish elk died approximately 7,700 years ago, not because it was weak, because it had been too successful at being what it was. 5. The mind that became its own problem. Somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago, a primate began doing something no other organism had done before. It started modeling its own future, not instinctively the way a squirrel buries a nut, consciously, abstractly, projecting forward in time to scenarios that had not happened and might never happen, simulating threats, pre-experiencing loss, grieving things before they were gone. This was the birth of the human cognitive architecture, and it was, by any measure, the most powerful adaptation the animal kingdom had ever produced. In a few 100,000 years, this single trait allowed one species to colonize every climate zone on Earth, dominate every ecosystem, reshape entire geologies. But the same neural structures that generate foresight generate dread. The same capacity for abstract modeling that allows a human to plan a civilization also allows it to simulate, in vivid and physiologically real detail, every possible way that civilization might fail. The same mind that wrote symphonies and mapped the genome is also capable of 3 AM terror at the thought of its own extinction. Researchers studying the global prevalence of anxiety disorders notice something that doesn't easily fit the standard evolutionary narrative. These conditions, which affect hundreds of millions of people, which cause measurable biological harm, which in severe cases are entirely debilitating, are not side effects of modern civilization. The neurological predispositions for them predate civilization by hundreds of thousands of years. The capacity for dread is not a bug introduced by modernity. It is a feature so deeply wired into human cognition that it cannot be separated from the intelligence itself. Evolution built the most sophisticated mind in the history of life on this planet. It just couldn't find a way to make it quiet. Thanks for watching.